for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
Hello everyone, welcome to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. You know us, Steven Jodrant, Armand Kafai, Jake Watroba. Today's episode, we preview the Women's World Cup. Yes, hit that subscribe button, whatever podcast, streaming outlet you're on. Leave us a 5-star review. Follow us on Twitter at Uncle Sam's Soccer Pod. And fellas, we finally have a World Cup in which the U.S. will take part. It's been quite some time, huh?
It's been a minute, right? It's been what, 4 years? 2015, right?
Oh yeah,
2015. You forgot what the other ones were.
No,
come on, Steven.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Come on, Steven. The women always seem to, make the World Cup and perform admirably. The men, well, we don't know what happened last year, so.
yeah, 4 years, man. It feels like 5. Feels like it's been a generation ago the last time we saw a U.S. compete at the World Cup. Jake, the excitement, it's rather interesting. There's a lot of nerves going around.
Well, yeah, given how the U.S. performed in the 2016 Olympics in Rio when they lost in I believe it was the round of 16 to the Swedish national team, there are a lot of nerves. And this team got off to a rough start following those Olympics with 3 losses in 2017, but they have a string of 31 consecutive unbeaten matches right now. So if you're a U.S. fan, you have to feel pretty good about their chances.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, listeners, we will have Henry Bushnell of Yahoo Sports call in, chat about the Women's World Cup. He's going to give us a broad preview. And question of the day, what are you most looking forward to in this summer's World Cup? Tweet at us at Unc Sam Soccer Pod for it. And guys, I'm going to begin this with simply saying I want to talk about the French nation as a whole. They obviously won the 2018 World Cup. Now, can they do it again just a year following it? No country has ever held both the men's and women's World Cup. France, who hosts the nation, have a big opportunity here to do something that's never been done before. Obviously, I think all the tickets are sold. Good luck finding tickets. It seems like they're going to be ready for it. They have the infrastructure. People are excited in France. They have a strong team. This will be a fun team to follow just because you got the home crowd behind them.
And they got sick jerseys.
Oh, yes.
Those kits
jerseys.
They have are glorious. I mean, my goodness. I think it should be a fun experience to watch. I mean, look, whenever you see even like a smaller event like the U20 World Cup, for example, they're playing in Poland, and whenever Poland's playing, it's all raucous and loud because it's the host nation. So it's always fun to see the host nation play, and I think, especially with France and how good their team is, I mean, some people are even tabbing them as the favorites. So I think it'll be fun to watch.
They sit 4th in the rankings. The Americans are odd-on favorites, but France follows at 7-2, Germany 11-2, England at 7-1, Netherlands 16-1, and Japan also at 16-1. But think about it. Let's go back to 2016, the European Championships, where the French team, the men's there, wasn't necessarily the best. They struggled, but man, that home field advantage really pulled them through and carried them to the final, ultimately losing to Cristiano Ronaldo and Portugal. But the home field advantage cannot be ignored, and France will have a huge leg up on everyone else. And I'm sure the Americans will have a great draw because Americans love to see their teams play. But this will be interesting. Now, question of the day, Armand, what are you most looking forward to in this summer's World Cup?
I'm really interested to see the performance of Sam Kerr. Many people have talked about how she was arguably one of the best players in the world last year. And she didn't win any awards for it or anything, but she's a very goal scoring forward. She had 16 goals in 20 matches for the Red Stars of the NWSL, and currently has 6 goals and 6 starts. I want to see how she does because the Australians group, it's not really a really easy group. They're playing Italy and Brazil, and Jamaica Brazil obviously has that pedigree, and Italy as well. But overall, I'm interested to see how Sam Kerr does, and I want to see, will she put on a show? Can she lead Australia to victory? I think the odds for Australia aren't that good to win the World Cup. And I was watching watching a little betting show, because we do a little betting on the pod. I don't know if it's legal or not or whatever, but is what it is. And they were talking about, it was actually Paul Carr. He was talking about how he could make a legitimate case the Australians could win the World Cup. And if you're going to do that, Sam Kerr's got to lead the charge. So I'm interested to see how she's going to do in that capacity.
The thing I'll be most interested in following for this summer's World Cup will be how many people will keep an eye on the World Cup with it being played in France. Games will now be starting at 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whereas in 2015 it was in Canada. So you had games starting right when you got off of work. Boom, prime time right there. Easy to watch. Didn't need to take time off of work. Easily accessible. With this World Cup, all the games will be in the afternoon on the weekdays or in the mornings. So I'll be interested to see what the numbers look like in terms of viewership when this thing is all said and done.
Yeah, and I think the other point being is that they don't play that great of a competition in the group stage. Not until the third match. Like, they open up against Thailand, June 11th, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. Then they play Chile, the 16th, at noon Eastern Time. So that's pretty much morning for the entire nation. And then you play, I think, the most exciting match of the group, probably for the crown of the group, against Sweden, Thursday, June 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And Armand, I mean, the last time the Americans have played these opponents, it's pretty much been pretty smooth sailing for them.
Right. Smooth sailing might be an understatement. I guess Thailand, the U.S. won their only match 9-0 on September 15th, 2016. It was actually the first game, following the 2016 Olympics. With Chile, they beat them 3-0 on August 31st and then 4-0 on September 4th. So, I mean, again, smooth sailing, but it's that match against Sweden, looking back. Remember, guys, they did beat Sweden 1-0 in 2017, but remember, in the Olympics, that was a team that knocked out the U.S., and I don't know if you guys remember, but that was also the time where Hope Solo came out and said, we played against a bunch of cowards, talking about the Swedish national team. So I guess you could say, like, the first two games, like, hey, you might watch them, for, U.S. pride, but they should win those two games. Where I don't think we're being wrong by saying they should have 6 points going into the game against Sweden.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Sweden could easily say they'll have 6 points too, and it's whoever takes the group. And at that point, the group will, if Sweden and the Americans have 6 points each, the group is settled. Like, there's no chance the other two nations have a chance to progress. So, question there is, what is the bigger advantage? Winning the group? Resting players? What do you do? Do you go for a draw? Goal differential might come into play depending on the scores of the other games, the head-to-head. What do? You want to keep the momentum? So there's going to be a lot of talking points leading into this match against Sweden. Remember, Sweden have kind of something to play for based on those comments from Hope Solo. You don't. Another question for you guys is: do you think those comments have a resounding effect? Do you think Sweden will get up for that game against the Americans? I mean, if I were the Swedish coach, I'd plaster those comments all around. Hey, do you remember last time we played the Americans in a meaningful game? Something that really mattered on the world stage. This is what they said about us. Go out there and show them what we can do.
They have to get them up for the game, right? They have to make them more motivated. I mean, if you're an athlete, you're looking for every little bit of extra motivation you can get to get up for a game. I mean, granted, that was 4 years ago. That was Hope Solo. She's not on the team anymore. But if you're Sweden, if you're the coach of Sweden, yeah, you're tacking that quote to a bulletin board, and you're saying they called us a bunch of cowards in Rio. Let's go out there and show them that we're not cowards. Let's go get the win.
Also, I've been looking at the bracket, and this puts up a very interesting scenario because the winner of Group F, which is the group that the United States is in, will actually play the winner of Group A, the group that France is in the quarterfinal stage. But you could make an argument and say, hey, maybe rest up some players if they get those 6 points and may not go for a win or something, but set yourself up for a more competitive advantage I guess. But you make the argument for that, but I don't think Jill Ellis did it. I think she wants to go for all 9 points and
keep the
secure
momentum
the
going.
group. Keep the momentum going. It's risky both ways.
Yes, very risky. Up next, Henry Bushnell of Yahoo Sports.
Joining us now on the show is Yahoo writer Henry Bushnell. You can follow him on Twitter at Henry Bushnell, where you can find all his comments and content on the upcoming Gold Cup and FIFA Women's World Cup. Henry, how you doing today?
I'm great, guys. How's it going?
We're going good. Doing well on this beautiful Sunday when we record. But Henry, obviously, the big event of the summer, the Women's World Cup, is coming up. And obviously, we got to talk about the United States. When we talk about the United States, manager Jill Ellis, she's called up over 60 players since Rio of 2016. The U.S. lost 3 matches in 2017, but following that third loss, they went on a 31-game unbeaten run with 28 wins and 3 draws. Henry, how good is this U.S. women's national team?
Frankly, I think they might be better than they were 4 years ago. And I know a lot of people will think that's crazy just on the surface, given that they won 4 years ago, and they're certainly not a given to win again this time around. But especially over the past year, there as you hinted at, over the past 3 years, there have been some rocky moments. But really, around 12 months ago, they started clicking. They were probably, frankly, they were ready for a World Cup to begin, last summer or last fall, when they were probably at the peak of that unbeaten run and their top form. But I'm still very confident in this team, and you'll hear a lot of people quibble about whether they'll be able to break down teams that bunker in, or whether they might be vulnerable to the counterattack. But there's talent up and down the squad. They're insanely deep. And I think they're absolutely the favorite at this summer's tournament.
Henry, what's tactically, how would you describe this team?
Yeah, so it's actually you can pretty clearly see it if you watch them. It's a 4-3-3, which is not what Ellis has always played. But in between Olympics and this World Cup, I think she recently described it as she kind of just chose based on personnel, and realized that a lot of her personnel fit a 4-3-3. You've got Alex Morgan as kind of like a do-it-all striker up top. You've got creative wingers. You've got Julie Ertz as a defensive midfielder. So for casual fans, she was Julie Johnston, and she was a center back at the last World Cup. Now she's kind of just like a destroy everything in her path defensive midfielder. And then you've got a couple creative players in front of her in midfield. The U.S., they're somewhat versatile in terms of tactics and how they approach a game. They can go direct to Morgan, or they can keep the ball, play on the ground, try to play through pressure, which they're going to be asked to do a lot. And I think they're better technically and playing the ball on the ground than they have been in the past. But then they also have the athletes to just win games on set pieces, or win games with physicality. So there's not one, tactical hallmark that they have that they're going to be dependent on. But yeah, it's a 4-3-3, and they'll attack in all different types of ways.
Henry, goalkeeping has been described as this team's biggest weakness. How big of a problem is the position for the U.S.?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Alyssa Nair will start, and has been the starter for a while now. And I'm probably guilty of this as well. I think we probably go a bit too far with how much criticism she gets and how much we describe her as a weakness. Because in the end, she's arguably a top 5 goalkeeper in the world, and certainly a top 10 goalkeeper in the world. The thing is, she's just not Hope Solo, and she's not Brianna Scurry. And the U.S. has for a while had one of the 2 or 3 best goalkeepers in the world, and Nair might not be that. She's not as good as Solo, at least not as good as Solo was at her peak. And she's had some very shaky moments in a U.S. shirt, especially over the past year or two. Like there are times where she really doesn't, where it looks like Ellis should have given more looks to other options, whether it's Branch or Harris, the two backup goalkeepers. But that said, like Nair is still, like I think like over the past few games, really since France friendly in January, she's been fine. Like hasn't really been an issue at all. And there's a chance that all of this hand wringing over and worry over whether she's good enough or not could just be totally moot, and she could be completely fine. But you never know how, especially like the goalkeeper position is probably more so than any. You never know how people are going to respond on the big stage. And all it takes is one mistake for it to become a controversy, a real problem, a talking point, and it could just spiral from there.
Henry, I want to go back and talk about Jill Ellis. Obviously, they didn't medal in 2016 at the Olympics. Is there some pressure on Jill Ellis to at least perform, have I guess a quote-unquote success at this World Cup? Whatever the U.S. deems to be a success. Is there any pressure on her at all?
I think there absolutely is pressure. Whether it's warranted or not, I'm not really sure. And as you said, I think so much of it stems from that one game in 2016. And when pressure over, like several years is completely stemming from one game, I find that problematic. And so I'm much higher on Jill Ellis than a lot of people are. I think she's a very good manager. And I think she's done a really good job kind of reforming this team and going through this cycle of regeneration where she, as you mentioned earlier, she called in a bunch of different players, decided, picked the few that she felt could really help this team and really, start this new generation of players, mix them in with the players from the older generation who can still contribute. And I think she's turned this team into a really good unit. But yes, there is pressure on her because that Sweden loss, that was the U.S.'s worst performance at a major tournament ever. And if they, and maybe we can talk about this in a bit, but like there's a chance they get France in the quarterfinals here. And if they lose and France is the second best team at the World Cup, and if they lose in the quarterfinals again, there's probably no way Jill Ellis survives that. Whether that's fair or not, having the two worst performances at major tournaments in program history at back-to-back major tournaments is just not something that a national team coach would allow a national team coach to keep her job.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about the field in just a second. I want to ask you, it's the biggest stage. So, and we've seen a ton of players get called up since 2016-16, and we've mentioned that multiple times now. But what are some new faces that the casual fan will be seeing probably not at the beginning of this tournament, but for maybe a couple tournaments from here on out?
Yeah, so there are several major players who will, I guess if you some of them were at the 2016 Olympics, but if you go back to players who were not at the 2015 World Cup, probably the biggest name to know is Lindsey Horan. She's a central midfielder who can, like, a really wide-ranging skill set. She's good in the air, good with the ball at her feet. She was the first American player to bypass college. She went over to PSG at age 18. And she was actually a striker back then. But she's come back when she came back to the Portland Thorns a couple of years ago. They turned her into a midfielder, and she is just like a dominant box-to-box midfielder. Now, Jill Ellis hasn't quite figured out how to use her in the best way and get as much out of her as Portland has gotten out of her. But she's awesome. Alongside her in midfield will be Rose Lavelle, another young, just like creative player who's kind of different than any other player the U.S. has, just in her playmaking ability and her ability on the ball in the middle of the field. So those are two names to certainly watch out for. Mallory Pugh is probably a name a fair amount of people know just because she was billed as this teen phenom. She's probably not even going to start, but she could make an impact off the bench and will certainly start many World Cup games in the future. I believe she recently turned 21. And then Crystal Dunn is another she's actually a more exciting attacking player than a defensive player, but she's going to play left back at this tournament. But in the way the U.S. system works, their fullbacks will get forward, and they often play kind of unbalanced so that Dunn from her left back position can become more of a winger and have an offensive impact. So I'd say those three players are probably the younger players to watch, who casual fans might not be super familiar with.
Henry, Carly Lloyd will be one of the few veteran holdovers from the 2015 team that will now be what appears to be in a reserve role. I wanted to ask you, how big is that for Jill Ellis to have a player like Lloyd coming off the bench late in matches?
It's huge. And as crazy as it sounds, like, Carly Lloyd is playing some of the best soccer of her life right now. Like, she's on a tear. She's scoring goals whenever she comes off the bench for the national team. She scored a couple goals in NWSL right before national team players left to go to camp to prepare for the World Cup. And yeah, frankly, I think I saw the other day that she's has the 5th or 6th shortest odds for the Golden Boot, and I honestly might put some money on that. Like, I think there's a chance that she can play a role in any type of game. Say the U.S. is beating Chile or Thailand 1-0 or 2-0 early in the second half. Carly Lloyd's the type of player who can come off the bench and just relentlessly go at a tired defense and an overmatched defense. And score like 2 or 3 goals in a second half. She's been playing really good lately. She's changed her game from what she was in 2015 when she was a midfielder. Now she really is a striker. But I think she's smarter than she's ever been. And I think she could have a really major impact at the World Cup.
How important is it, Henry, for Jill Ellis to also manage that as well? Because I think Carly came out. Actually, I remember Carly came out and said, "Hey, look, I don't want to be on the bench." Like, how important is it for Jill to manage that, or is Carly's mentality more of, it's whatever the coach wants? But obviously, she isn't pleased not to be starting.
Right. No, yeah, she said, I think I should be starting. I want to be starting. I'm not okay coming off the bench. But I bet Ellis and even a lot of the players who are playing in front of her would tell you, honestly, that's the attitude they want her to have. And, they want her to be pushing. And that doesn't mean that she should be. I think it's okay to say that you're totally fine with her saying that, but also B, acknowledge that no, she shouldn't be starting. Like, Alex Morgan as a 90-minute player, from the start, is better than her, and can do more all around for the team. So I think, if all goes to plan, Carly Lloyd will have a major impact, but it will never become a controversy that whether she should be starting over Alex Morgan, because she shouldn't. But so as long as that, and the media will probably try to push that talking point if Morgan isn't scoring and Carly Lloyd is scoring off the bench. But I don't think, within the team, I don't think it's really a major problem.
Henry, let's talk about the field. France, they're hosting it. They have an opportunity to do something that's never done before, and that's capture both the men's and women's World Cup in years in succession. How prominent or how dominant can this French team be, and how scary should the U.S. be in the fact that they could be facing them in the quarterfinals?
Yeah, I think it's really the one team that is possibly in the U.S.'s head a bit, and that the U.S. might be worried about. I've heard multiple U.S. players kind of mention, not even ask specifically about it, but say the pressure's on France, on home soil, they're the ones who should be feeling the pressure, almost the U.S. players trying to deflect pressure off themselves. So if you ask them who their biggest challengers are for the World Cup, they might not say France, but they definitely, in their heads, they would say France. They're thinking France. France is definitely the second best team, and maybe some would argue the best team. They have the core of some. Lyon on the women's side has won the past 4 women's Champions League titles in Europe, and the core of that Lyon team is the core of this France team, and it's a team that's kind of been building to this moment, been building to the 2019 World Cup that they knew they were going to host. They've got a lot of players in their prime, all different lines of the field, whether it's, center backs. Wendy Renard is a center back whose name you'll hear a lot. She's 6'2". She's, great all around player. Amandine Henry is their defensive midfielder. She's awesome. They've got a several forwards who have been scoring for them for years. They sort of like the U.S. they're possibly not as deep as the U.S. 1 through 20, but 1 through 13 or 15, they're just as deep as the U.S. and arguably just as talented, like in terms of the top players as well.
Henry, the English women made a sort of Cinderella run in 2015, going deep into the World Cup. Can we expect the same from the English this time around?
Yeah, expectations are even higher for them this time. And I think they're better. I think this is the most talented team they've ever had. Similar to some of the other teams we talked about, both the U.S. and France, like they have so many good attacking players, more than they've ever had. And it's going to be tough for Phil Neville, who's their manager now, to kind of find minutes for all of them and find roles for all of them. And there's a wide age range too. They've got a talented 20-year-old attacker. They've got players who are in their 30s who still absolutely merit a place in the team. So yeah, I think that English team is more talented than the one from 4 years ago. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get as far as they did 4 years ago. And there's a chance that it ends up being a disappointment, but the expectation for them is I think anything less than a semifinal for them would be considered a disappointment.
Henry, final question. We're going to do a little fill in the blank.
Okay.
Finish this sentence. The U.S. women's national team will win the World Cup if...
That's a tough one. Honestly, if Alex Morgan plays to the level that she can, I think she's one of the most important players on this team, and she hasn't been scoring goals like she often does for the national team recently. She 1-2 years ago she was on an absolute tear. Recently she hasn't really been, but if she can finish at the level we know she's capable of, I think the U.S. is going to be tough to beat.
Henry, we appreciate it. Just wanted to give you the opportunity to add anything else you'd like and go ahead and plug where we can find your writing, your work.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Henry Bushnell, HenryBushnell. And we've got a hub for all our preview content for the World Cup at Yahoo. If you go to Yahoo's Yahoo soccer page, or if you just search Yahoo Sports World Cup Preview Hub, you can find it. We've got a lot of good stuff from features to rankings to U.S. analysis and stuff. We've got a lot of great writers who've been putting in a lot of work on this. So yeah, would love if you guys if everybody could check it out. And appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh, thank you. Well, there you have it, Henry Bushnell. Listeners, go give him a follow, read his content. It's wonderful insight to the World Cup. And some crazy facts, Armand, you've been digging up. Talk about the dominance of this Lyon team winning 4 straight Champions League. But it's not even the fact they just won 4 straight. It's more than that. Yeah,
it's way more than that. And the crazy thing is, I think out of the last 10 Champions Leagues, they've shown up in 8 finals. It's insane. They showed up 8 finals. They've won 6. They were runner-up in the other 2. In the only 2 years they did not show up in the final, they lost to Turbine Potsdam in the round of 16 and PSG in the round of 16 as well. And they've dominated in the fashion. For example, they beat in 2016 or 2017, the round of 16, they beat FC Zurich. Your Swedish team.
Swiss.
I meant Swiss. I swear to God, I meant Swiss. 17-0.
Nice.
They also beat, a team from Kazakhstan, 16-0. They beat Ajax's female team this year, 13-0.
Wow.
They're dominant. They're extremely dominant. And they're one of the best players in the world, Ida Hatterberg, isn't even playing in the World Cup, and she plays for Lyon, and she's so dominant as well.
Yeah, she's protesting.
Overall, that team is just legitimately is a powerhouse in Europe.
Listeners, question of the day. Make sure you tweet us at UncSamSoccerPod. What are you most looking forward to in this summer's World Cup? And a lot of moving parts. Henry gave us a great preview. And guys, we're going to finish on this note. Last several winners included the U.S., Norway, Germany, Japan. Do you think this is the year that we see someone new get added to that list?
No. I think we're 4 years too early from that. We're starting to see some developments in women's football. But, I mean, overall, I think it's still going to be the consensus 2 or 3 or 4 teams that compete for the title. I mean, obviously, we've seen the investment, like I said, in women's football go up. I mean, I guess maybe my litmus test is kind of bad. But I talk about the CONCACAF Women's Championship. I got a first row seat to look at that. And the U.S. was by far, and this could be a result of the U.S. just being better, like as Henry mentioned, but they were by far the better team, like significantly the better team. I don't think any other team in that region, maybe outside of Canada, and Canada not even, it wasn't even close for when the Canada and the U.S. played as well. I don't think any other team in that region could really compete the U.S. And I mean, you could take that snapshot and maybe go around the world. I don't think so. I don't think we're going to see a team. I think we're going to see one of those predicted favorites win the World Cup.
Predicted favorites, but my money, guys. If I were a betting man, take the French. They're at home, and I don't think you can get away from that home field advantage. I think the nation is going to just push them forward.
I agree with Steven. I'm putting my money on France, the host nation. They'll have all the momentum. They'll have all the wind in their sail with the home field advantage. I think we might see the end of the Jill Ellis era here in the U.S. if they do meet in the quarterfinals. Give me the French. Give me La Bleu to win the 2019 FIFA World Cup.
Allez les Bleus! All right, listeners, tweet at us at UncSamSoccerPod. Give us your thoughts, your answer to the question of the day. What are you most looking forward to in this year's World Cup? You know the game, at Steven Jodder, at Jake Watroba, at Armand Kafai. And come back tomorrow for more.